Just read an op-ed in the Daily Telegraph. This is from the 5th of February, so last week. But the op-ed is by, um, I can't believe a week's already passed since the CGTN decision, over a week. Anyway, the op-ed is by Charles Parton, who was a diplomat with extensive experience in China, I understand, for 22 years. Um, and it's entitled "It's a Bitter New Winter for UK-China Ties." Um, I've already spoken about the CGTN decision, which I really welcomed. I thought that was good news. Um, and I don't know that if I included in that, I don't know if when I uploaded that video, the decision had already been made for the BBC World News to be blocked in China. I think that was beforehand. But it's disappointing but not surprising. Whatever official line that the Chinese regime comes out with for doing that, and it is the Chinese regime, they've got no media regulator because, everything in China is controlled by the party. So whatever line the CCP comes out with, it's very obvious that it is just revenge. Um, also resentment that the BBC was reporting on the Xinjiang concentration camps, which they call fake news. Um, but there is something in that, actually. I will be touching on Charles Parton's op-ed in this video, but just a quick word about some of the rhetoric that comes from so-called Chinese diplomats. I say so-called because they're getting increasingly abrasive and undiplomatic. In the Hu Jintao era, um, China was a major human rights abuser. There was really bad things going on. I think it's escalated under Xi Jinping. But in those days, it was a case of, so we're talking the period roughly 2002 to 2012. In that era, when human rights issues was brought up, there would be denials and accusations of Western media bias. The denials would be quite polite. It would just be denials, and that would be it. And Chinese diplomats were more diplomatic then. They would focus on etiquette and so on. And that was true right up to about 2015. I think one of the worst mistakes that David Cameron made as Prime Minister, and I rank him as an average Prime Minister, he done some good things, but one of the worst mistakes he made, and his Chancellor George Osborne made, was to really pander to Beijing. And this was under the delusion, as far as I'm concerned, that um, really trying to soften up to China, really trying to pander to China, there's no other way to put it, would be in our interest. I don't think it is. Clearly, there are areas that we will need to work with Beijing on. There may be certain global situations, certainly climate change is an obvious one. There may be international security situations that we need to work with them on. Let's say, just as a scenario, a British ship, merchant ship, and a Chinese ship were both taken by Somali pirates, then naturally, in the same situation, in the same event, then naturally the British and Chinese sides would have to work together. Um, it's also worth noting that, the Britain bashing that comes from Chinese state media, they conveniently forget that Britain donated a lot of humanitarian aid after the Sichuan earthquake, and we still give a lot of development aid to China. That's something I think demands a lot of scrutiny. If that money is going to poor regions of China and it's helping to build schools, well, I say schools, but again, there's communist brainwashing going on there. But if it's helping to build hospitals or it's helping development in more poor regions, because there's a disparity in China between the coastal regions, which tend to be quite wealthy, and more inland regions, like where I worked, which do have a fair amount of poverty. So if I think it's something like 70 million, or I'm not going to quote the figure, but it's a fair amount. I think we need to look at really where that's going. We need to press the Chinese side to really show where that money is going. And we also, I don't think that foreign aid should be used to kind of blackmail in diplomacy, but I do think that when jingoistic Chinese state mouthpieces vilify this country, we do have a right to sort of throw it back a bit, um, fight back. I think that every country should do the same thing when it comes to the Chinese regime. I mean, Australia, this boycott of Australian wine, what was that all about? It was because Australia called for an inquiry into the origins of COVID. Um, Even though it was the Australian Navy that helped out in the search for MH370, something the Chinese regime would like its people to forget. Um, but this is how China is operating these days. It's basically, it's called wolf warrior diplomacy. I call it thug diplomacy because it's basically bullying and threats and give us what we want or else. And the sooner the world starts standing up to it, the better. What we're dealing with, as I see it, is a very assertive, confident China right now, at least outwardly. There may be things going on internally that, there may be more cracks at the seam than it seems. Also, it's important to understand that China's power is not absolute. I mean, the grip that the Communist Party has right now is pretty strong. But take, for example, its military. On the surface, it looks very powerful. By personnel, it's massive. I think it's, if not the biggest in the world, certainly in the top three um, as a standing army. But actual battle experience is somewhat limited. Unlike, for example, the British Army, which has had abundant battle experience over the last 30 years. The last time China had a large scale war was in 1978. Um, and if I've got this wrong, people can correct me, but I understand the last major war that China was directly involved in a combat form, was the 1978 border war with Vietnam. It was a bloody war, but that was 40 years ago, so over 40 years ago. So that means that the personnel numbers don't kind of balance out with experience. Also, Chinese equipment, I'm no military expert, but it may not be as high a standard as they claim. They've been caught out using, for example, footage from American action movies to kind of demonstrate their military power in so-called military training videos or promotional videos. So, you know, the size of an army doesn't necessarily equate to strength. So in that's one area where Chinese power may not be quite as profound as it seems on the surface. I'm not saying it's not powerful, but it may be one area where it's exaggerated or, not as powerful as it seems on the surface. Um, but just to touch a little bit on what Charles Parton's talking about, he's discussing this issue of the BBC being banned, in response to both Ofcom's decision on CGTN as well as their reporting of the Uyghur concentration camps. You know, it's obviously revenge, but if China has nothing to hide, and I said this in the last video, then they wouldn't be so cagey about outside reporters reporting on this. If, as they say, it's fake news, they would fully allow international access to this. They would fully allow international reporters to visit those camps, not on very strictly controlled guided tours, but really, really see what is going on there. And I don't think they're prepared to do that. I think they want it tightly kind of controlled and choreographed, and it's. I think we're dealing with a regime that thrives on lies. The only thing the Chinese Communist Party cares about, the only thing, is power. That's it, and that's all. and nothing over the last 70 years has convinced me otherwise. It's often said by CCP apologists, oh, they've lifted millions out of poverty. Well, they have, but does that justify the millions that have been persecuted? One big positive thing doesn't kind of mitigate the inhumanity that this party has shown. Um, I'm not going to read out the whole piece that Charles Parton, has written, but he does close on some interesting thoughts, which I might quote here. Um, this is regarding, actually, I think this was written before the BBC was banned. What can we expect? First, verbal barrage. Secondly, the move of CGTN's European headquarters to Brussels. Well, good riddance. Brussels can have them, where its presence has already started to be beefed up, probably in expectation of the Ofcom verdict. Third, reciprocity on the BBC, not least because of its horrifying report from eyewitnesses of organised rape and torture in the concentration camps in Xinjiang. Well, they've already done that to the BBC. The likelihood is that the BBC's operation in China will be shuttered. That's happened. In broader terms, this could well be the start of a bitter winter of relations. I hope that I am wrong, because COVID, climate change, and a stumbling global economy require cooperation, mutual knowledge, and a respect for our differing interests and values. But I do not intend to bet on it. When the COVID travel ban is lifted, I, for not one, will not be visiting China. I have no wish to join my friend Michael Kovrig as a hostage, or eventually to be seen on CGT and CCTV making a confession. And in the report, he also mentioned investigative journalist Peter Humphrey, who I quoted in my petition about CGTN. I do like to think I played a small role in that decision, because what's interesting is Ofcom is now taking quite a hard line. Um, they're actually saying that, let's see, they might even give off, CGTN fines. If I could just find the quote here. Um, yeah, due to the nature of its worst news for Beijing is that Ofcom is also considering charges against the Chinese broadcaster for further abuses. Several involve complaints about CCTV's participation in and broadcasting of forced confessions under conditions that amount to torture. That's Peter Humphreys. I I think that's good, but is CGTN going to pay up now that they've been blocked in the UK? Someone pointed out to me, one of my subscribers, they could still broadcast via YouTube. Ofcom has no jurisdiction over the internet. Um, but I do think that at least getting the TV airing taken away is a good thing. I'm under no illusion, CGTN probably didn't have a massive outreach in the UK, but it was the principle of it, and I think it was the right decision. Um, Now, Charles Parton also mentioned something else, which is I'm just kind of taking point out of this op-ed rather than just reading it all out. I still think that Ofcom, to me, they took a long time to act. I give them credit now. I don't necessarily take away my criticism. I think they should have acted sooner. But um, yeah, he mentions a very important point about how the CCP just cannot grasp that Ofcom and the government separate entities. In China, the party controls the media, and the media answers to them. So they just don't grasp that this is not a government decision. Um, and yeah, I'm just gonna be stagnated in how I deliver this video if I keep trying to pick pieces out. But basically, what he's touching on here is wolf warrior diplomacy, or the lack of. Um, in a sense, I'm almost pleased that they're getting more abrasive because it shows their true ugly nature. I'd almost prefer that they were jingoistic and rude and blunt rather than putting on this polite facade, because by doing that, they're showing their true colours. and it gives us more of a platform to basically hit back. I really do think that the government needs to be more. There's this British thing about understating things, you know. Frankly, I think sometimes we're too polite. I think if Chinese state mouthpieces, um, smear this country, if they come out with blatant lies, we need to basically shame them and say, well, this is the nature of the CCP. Sometimes I think there is such a thing as being too diplomatic. I think there are times when blunt language is justified. And I think in the case of the current Chinese regime, it's one such time. One thing is for sure, we shouldn't, we should not pander to China again, not for the foreseeable future anyway. Not so long as Xi Jinping's in power. Um, Boycotting the Winter Olympics, I think that's not something we should rush to do. We should certainly consider it though. I mean, I have huge sympathy for athletes who train hard for these events and then they get caught up in the politics of it. So that would be one part of me that's maybe reluctant in that regard because I think it would be unfair on the athletes. However, they could still compete under a neutral flag, as happened in the Moscow Olympics and the Los Angeles Olympics. But one thing is for damn sure, if the 2022 games in Beijing are going to be a repeat of the 2008 games where they really try to make this big global PR thing and send the torch around the world. If we were to pander to that, I think it would be unforgivable because make no mistake about it. We could say that the Olympics shouldn't be about politics. It is. There's no getting away from it. In the case of a country like China, they they see it as a sporting event, but they also see it absolutely as a PR event. Now, it would be absolutely perverse if, for that 1 month in 2022, the regime in China was just allowed to showcase itself to the world with all the cultural things that come with the Olympics, and say, "Oh, look, how great this is!" And use all their kind of this facade of, "Oh, let's have global harmony and it's all about peace," whilst Uyghur people are squandering in those camps at the very same time. And of course, in 2008, the big issue was Tibet. Um, I really do think that we have tried for decades this approach of caution with China, of just kind of, bringing up human rights issues, but being very cautious in not offending them too much. Frankly, I think we need to take the gloves off and just denounce these things. We need to stand up for our values. And when China attacks our values, firstly, we don't make any apology. Secondly, we need to double down. We need to double down. We need, for example, although the government's obviously independent of Ofcom, if the rhetoric is notched up, what the government needs to do is say, whilst we have no jurisdiction on the decision to ban CGTN, we do ask CGTN to explain how they have aired forced confessions, how they justify this, see what they have to say. Put the buggers on the spot. Um, the Telegraph also reported that three Chinese spies have just been arrested in this country over the last year, posing as journalists. There are some who claim that I saw one Chinese national young guy living in the United States claimed that this is a second yellow scare. And he was trying to make an analogy with in the late 19th century under the Chester Arthur administration in the United States, how there was this kind of xenophobia. But it is a totally, totally different context. China then was a poor country, and there was anti Chinese discrimination, no question about it. There was even massacres of Chinese miners in the late 19th century. The situation today is a world of difference. Firstly, China is a rising superpower. Secondly, Chinese espionage in Western countries is palpable and real. And thirdly, China is absolutely trying to undermine Western democracies. And they do this, for example, by stoking up the Chinese diaspora. That's why I feel now that we need to be maybe a bit more hardline in who we allow into the country. I would never support a Trumpian sort of ban all Chinese people. Absolutely not. But I do think, for example, Chinese students need to respect the host nation. And if they engage in bullying of their peers, going around flying the Chinese flag, that's not only a mark of disrespect to the host nation, it's also showing that they are acting as pawns for the Chinese regime. They can deny it. You tell these young nationalistic students that they're just puppets of the CCP. They'll say, "Oh no, no, we're not the Chinese government." Why then are you being such apologists for the Chinese government? But of course, our universities have got this. Our university departments are more interested in taking Chinese money than standing up for British values and Western values. And I think it's also a case of shaming those peacefully, shaming those who will be China's stooges. If that comes down to university departments that are silent in terms of, you know, British values because they don't want to offend their Chinese bankers. It's just by bankers, of course, I mean funders. It's metaphorical. We just need to look at every area. I think there's a lot more we can do. I think we need to ban Confucius Institutes. I think we need to vet Chinese nationals, not ban them. I wouldn't advocate discrimination against Chinese individuals, but vetting is not discrimination. Vetting is simply a security mechanism. Um, so, for example, when Chinese nationals apply for a visa to be a student or a tourist or a business person, I think there should be a kind of waiver or a stipulation that says they will respect British sovereignty and they will not promote the Chinese Communist Party. I genuinely think the time has come to put that sort of stipulation. And if they violate it, then they're violating the visa regulations. Why not? Why shouldn't we start to get more hardline and assertive on this? There will be some who say, "Oh, it's racism, it's discrimination." Um, Consider what China's doing right now, holding diplomats as hostages. That's essentially what it is. And I'm so disgusted and sickened by uh, what the CCP is doing. I just think we need to be a lot more assertive. Make no mistake about it. Westerners right now in China need to be very careful. And if you are Western, if you are a teacher, if you are a business person, obviously be careful what you say. But frankly, as someone who's lived and worked there twice, I would seriously think about getting out. You may have had a very good experience there. You may find that you have friends there or you have business interests or whatever. The way things are going, I honestly think we're entering a new Cold War, unfortunately. And any Western national in China is prone to be used. So I would honestly suggest that Western nationals think about their position. Because if things escalate badly or deteriorate badly, they will absolutely target Western British citizens, even, just teachers. So I'm not telling anyone what to do. I would just say, if it was me, I would seriously consider my position.